The morning rain in Seattle hovered uncertainly, as if deciding whether to fall or simply linger in the gray mist that hung over the streets. Inside Evergreen & Co., a small cafe tucked between a florist and a bookstore on Pine Street, the windows were fogged with condensation, turning the world outside into a watercolor of passing umbrellas and blurred headlights. Emma Clark wiped the counter in slow circles, her hands moving with the rhythm of habit rather than thought. The espresso machine hissed behind her, the smell of roasted beans mingling with faint cinnamon, and the low murmur of conversation blended into a soft, comforting hum. It was another ordinary morning in an unremarkable life, until the bell over the door chimed. Emma glanced up automatically, ready with her usual smile, and froze. Her body stiffened as though the air itself had turned solid. There, sitting in the corner booth by the window, was a man she had not seen in 12 years. Noah Prescott. The name formed in her mind before she could stop it, before her heart began its wild, uneven thud. He looked different and yet unmistakably the same. The boy she had once loved with every piece of her 17-year-old heart now sat in a tailored gray suit, his posture confident, his gestures deliberate as he spoke to 3 people who clearly worked for him. The faint glow of the pendant lights above caught in his hair, darker now, shorter but still unruly enough to fall slightly over his brow when he turned his head. Emma's throat tightened. For a second, she wondered if her mind had conjured him out of memory, some cruel trick born from exhaustion and too many sleepless nights. But no, he was real, breathing, smiling, sitting no more than 10 feet away. She felt the world tilt slightly, the edges of reality blurring like the rain outside. He had disappeared after prom night, leaving nothing but the echo of his promises and the silence that followed. He had been her first love, her first heartbreak, the boy who once drew dream houses on napkins and swore he would build one for her someday. And then he was gone. Now he was back, older, sharper, and clearly successful. He laughed at something one of his associates said, and the sound struck her like a memory wrapped in sunlight and ache. Emma's hands tightened on the dish towel until her knuckles whitened. She turned away quickly, pretending to check the espresso machine, her heart hammering in her chest. Maybe he wouldn't recognize her. Maybe time and distance had erased her from his mind. After all, she was just a barista now, a woman in a faded apron and a messy bun, standing behind a counter that smelled of coffee and compromise. The life she had imagined for herself all those years ago had faded piece by piece. After her father's death, after bills piled up, after dreams became something she kept folded away for later, she swallowed hard and reached for a clean cup, trying to focus on the simple grounding task of pouring steamed milk. But her hands trembled and the pitcher clinked against the counter. Emma, table 5, needs a refill, called Zoe, her coworker, her voice pulling Emma back to the present. Right, Emma said, forcing steadiness into her tone. She grabbed the coffee pot, pasted on a smile, and weaved between tables, keeping her head down as she moved past Noah's booth. She could feel his presence like static in the air, her pulse jumping with every step. The scent of his cologne reached her woodsy, expensive, painfully familiar. For a moment she was 17 again, sitting in his truck under the stars, her hand in his. Believing that love could outlast anything, she blinked the memory away and refilled a customer's cup. Don't look, she told herself, but curiosity betrayed her. As she turned, her gaze flickered toward the corner booth. Noah was leaning back in his seat, now listening as one of his companions spoke, his expression thoughtful, the kind of calm authority that came from years of getting exactly what he wanted. He didn't look like the boy who had left her behind. He looked like a man who owned his world. Emma tore her eyes away, returning to the counter, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She kept her focus on small mechanical actions, cleaning steaming milk, stacking cups, anything to drown the storm inside her. "Hey, Zoe," whispered, sidling up beside her. "Is that who I think it is?" The guy from Don't Emma interrupted softly, shaking her head. "Please don't." Zoe bit her lip and nodded, sensing the boundary. Emma inhaled deeply, trying to calm herself, but every sound in the cafe felt amplified. The clatter of cups, the rain tapping against the windows, the low hum of Noah's voice. The smell of coffee seemed heavier, the room smaller. When the meeting at the corner booth finally ended, Noah stood smoothing his jacket. His colleagues gathered their tablets and briefcases, chatting casually as they headed toward the exit. Emma dared a glance just as he turned. Their eyes met. The moment stretched fragile and electric. He hesitated the faintest flicker of recognition, crossing his face, then softened into something unreadable, half surprise, half disbelief. Emma's breath caught. For an instant it was as if 12 years dissolved into dust, and she was once again that girl by the lake, waiting for him to explain why love wasn't enough. Then someone called his name and the spell broke. He looked away, murmured something to his team, and walked out into the rain. The bell chimed as the door closed behind him. Emma stood still, the towel hanging limp in her hand. Around her the cafe buzzed on as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside everything had shifted. Her reflection stared back at her from the shiny espresso machine. Tired eyes, flushed cheeks, a heart she thought she had long since mended, now trembling like it had never healed at all. She exhaled slowly, her chest tight, her pulse unsteady. He left her without a word, and now he was sitting 10 feet away, looking like a man who could buy the world. The rain had followed Emma home that evening, drumming against the narrow windows of her apartment, as if refusing to let her forget the day. The small space smelled faintly of lavender detergent and coffee grounds. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom on the second floor of an old brick building in Capitol Hill. But it was hers, and it was quiet, which was all she could afford. She kicked off her shoes, dropped her damp jacket by the door, and leaned against the counter, trying to catch her breath. The ghost of Noah Prescott lingered in every thought, his face replaying in her mind with painful clarity. 12 years had done nothing to dull the sharpness of that memory, or the ache of abandonment. She had spent so long convincing herself she was over him that the girl who waited by the lake that summer night had died with her teenage illusions. But seeing him again shattered that illusion in an instant. She turned on the kettle, its whistle rising in the stillness, like a reminder that life went on, no matter how unwilling the heart might be. The apartment was cluttered with the signs of a woman stretched thin. Sketchbooks stacked beside bills, half-finished designs pinned to a corkboard, a flickering lamp on the dining table. Before everything fell apart, Emma had dreamed of becoming an interior designer. She'd even been accepted into a good program at the University of Washington. Then her father's sudden heart attack changed everything. The scholarship only covered part of her tuition, and when the medical bills came, she dropped out to help her mother keep the family afloat. Her mother, Lila, had worked at the Maple Creek textile plant for 20 years, until layoffs swept through the town like a storm. With the factory gone and her father buried, Emma found herself taking 2 jobs, first at a bookstore, then eventually at the cafe. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the rent and allowed her to send a little money home to help her younger brother Ben, who had just started college in Oregon. Responsibility had become her daily companion. She'd long ago learned that survival didn't leave room for dreams. The kettle whistled, and Emma poured the hot water over a tea bag, wrapping her hands around the mug for warmth. The rain outside softened into a mist glowing under the yellow street lights. Across the room, a framed photograph sat on the shelf, a younger version of her family. Smiling on a summer day, her father's arm draped over her shoulders. She traced the glass with her thumb and felt the familiar pang of loss. He would have told her to keep dreaming. He always had. But dreams didn't pay bills or fix broken roofs. Her phone buzzed, vibrating across the table. A text from her mother blinked on the screen. "Did you get off work safe?" "Don't forget to rest, honey." Emma smiled faintly as she typed back, "I'm home. Everything's fine. Love you." She didn't mention seeing Noah. How could she explain that the boy who left her without explanation had reappeared as the kind of man who could buy the cafe she worked in 10 times over? That he'd walked into her world again as if the past hadn't left a scar? She turned off the lights and moved to the couch, curling under an old knitted blanket. The rhythmic patter of rain filled the silence. Tomorrow she'd open the cafe again, smile at customers, and pretend she hadn't spent the night haunted by a pair of gray eyes that once promised her forever. The next morning came with fog rolling in from the bay. The city smelled of wet asphalt and roasted beans as she walked to work, her umbrella barely shielding her from the drizzle. Inside Evergreen & Co., the early rush had already started. She tied her apron and joined Zoe behind the counter. "Rough night," Zoe asked, sliding a tray of croissants into the display. "Could say that," Emma replied, forcing a smile. Still thinking about the guy, Zoe lowered her voice. "You don't have to pretend I didn't see your face yesterday." Emma sighed. "It's been 12 years, Zoe. I don't even know why it hit me like that." "Because some ghosts don't age," Zoe said simply. Then turned to greet a customer. Emma wanted to laugh at the truth in it, but found she couldn't. Around mid-morning, the usual crowd filled the cafe, students typing furiously on laptops, freelancers claiming their corners, and regulars sipping lattes while reading the Seattle Times. Among them was Mr. Whitaker, the retired painter who came in every Thursday morning. His white beard and kind blue eyes made him look like an off-duty Santa Claus. "Ah, Miss Clark," he greeted warmly as she delivered his cappuccino. "You always look like your mind is somewhere else." "Dreaming of bigger things, perhaps," Emma chuckled. "If you call paying rent a dream, then yes." He shook his head with gentle disapproval. "You're too young to let life become only about surviving." "I saw the sketches in your notebook the other day, don't deny it." "You've got an artist's heart." "An artist's heart doesn't keep the lights on," she said, though her tone was soft. Mr. Whitaker smiled knowingly. "True, but someday, if you're lucky, that heart will refuse to stay quiet. When it does listen to it." She nodded politely, unsure how to respond, then retreated to the counter. His words stayed with her long after he left. That afternoon, as she cleaned the espresso machine, her phone buzzed again. A message from Ben lit up the screen. Got my midterm grades. All A's. Thanks for helping with rent this month, Em. I'll pay you back soon. Emma smiled despite herself. Her brother's texts were small reminders that her sacrifices weren't meaningless. She typed, "You don't owe me anything, just keep doing your best." Outside, the sun struggled to break through the clouds, a faint promise of light behind layers of gray. The bell above the door jingled as a group of tourists entered, chattering cheerfully, and Emma straightened her apron, slipping back into the rhythm of service. Hours later, as evening crept in, she closed up the cafe, mopping the floor in the warm hum of dimmed lights. Zoe had already left for her night class, leaving Emma alone with the soft crackle of the radio and the comforting scent of espresso. She wiped down the counter one last time and looked around. Everything in this cafe was familiar, safe, predictable. The opposite of the chaos Noah's sudden reappearance had stirred inside her. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and stepped out into the cool night. The streets glistened with reflections of neon signs and street lamps. She walked home slowly, her thoughts a quiet storm. Life had taught her to keep moving, to survive without expecting more. But somewhere beneath that calm, something restless had awakened the faint, dangerous whisper of what if? What if the boy who broke her heart had come back for a reason? What if the past wasn't finished with her yet? She pushed the thought aside, though it clung stubbornly, like the drizzle on her coat. As she reached her apartment building, she paused, glancing up at the gray sky. Before unlocking the door, she told herself that tomorrow would be ordinary again, that the world would settle back into its steady rhythm. But deep down, she already knew that once the past finds its way back, nothing ever stays ordinary for long. The next afternoon, Seattle's sky darkened early, heavy clouds rolling in like an unfinished thought. The rain began quietly, soft at first, then building into a steady rhythm against the windows of Evergreen & Co. Emma stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned back. Her focus buried in the usual chaos of mid-afternoon orders. She had just finished topping a caramel latte with foam when the bell above the door chimed and she looked up without thinking. Noah Prescott walked in alone. The air seemed to change temperature as if the world had taken a slow breath. He wasn't surrounded by his team this time. No polished entourage, no walls of formality. Just him. A tall man in a charcoal coat, droplets of rain clinging to his shoulders. His tie slightly loosened as though the day had worn him down. His eyes swept the room, scanning for an empty seat, then landed on her. For a second he hesitated, surprise flickering in his expression, before it softened into something else, something quieter, almost tentative. Emma's fingers clenched around the edge of the counter. She reminded herself to breathe. Maybe he was just here for coffee. Maybe this was nothing. He approached slowly, and when he reached the register, his voice carried that same calm steadiness she remembered. 1 black coffee, no sugar. She nodded, typing it in her gaze fixed on the screen. "That'll be $3.75, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. When she finally dared to look up, he was studying her, really studying her. Then he smiled. It wasn't the easy, boyish grin she remembered from high school. This one carried weight history, the faintest trace of apology. "Emma Clark," he asked, his tone careful, like someone stepping on thin ice. Her name in his voice made her chest tighten. "That's me," she said, flatly handing him his change. "How have you been?" he asked, still smiling. though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. She wanted to laugh or maybe cry. How had she been 12 years of silence and one polite question? "Fine," she said simply, sliding his cup across the counter. "You better now," he replied, and for a moment the warmth in his eyes almost disarmed her. Almost. She forced herself to look away, busying her hands with wiping the counter that was already spotless. "You run this place?" he asked, glancing around the cafe. "Work here," she corrected. "Oh," his voice softened. "It suits you, the atmosphere, I mean." She didn't respond. A dozen words hovered on her tongue. Where were you? Why did you leave? But she swallowed them all. It wasn't her job to fill in 12 years of silence. He lingered for a moment, watching her move. She could feel his gaze like sunlight. She didn't want to admit she missed. "You look different," he said at last. "Older, maybe, stronger." "Time does that," she replied. "It changes people." He nodded slowly, then looked down at his coffee. "I suppose it does." He took a sip, wincing slightly. Still too hot. The familiarity of the gesture, the small grimace he always made when he burned his tongue, hit her unexpectedly hard. She turned away, pretending to fix something on the shelf, but her voice betrayed her calm. "You always drink it too fast." He looked up, surprise flashing in his eyes before it gave way to something softer. "You remember that some things are hard to forget." She regretted the words the moment they left her mouth. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Outside rain blurred the view of the street, turning the city into a reflection of itself. The cafe was nearly empty now, just the quiet hum of the espresso machine and a soft indie song playing in the background. Noah leaned against the counter, slightly not intruding, but not leaving either. "I heard about your dad," he said gently. Her breath caught. "You heard a few years ago. I wanted to reach out, but you didn't." The words came out sharper than she intended. His jaw tightened. "You're right, I didn't. I thought maybe I'd lost the right." "You did." The sentence fell between them like shattered glass. For a moment neither spoke. Then Noah nodded slowly, accepting it. "Fair," he said. "Still, I'm sorry. For everything." Emma kept her gaze fixed on the counter. "You don't have to apologize. It's been a long time. 12 years isn't that long when every year feels like one you wish you could redo." His words came out quiet, unguarded, and for a second she saw the boy. He had once been the one who believed in forever. It made her chest ache in a way she didn't want to name. "Enjoy your coffee," she said finally. Her voice steady but distant. "I have to get back to work." He didn't argue. He simply nodded, taking another sip before setting the cup down. "It was good to see you, Emma." He said sincerity in every word. "I mean that." She forced a polite smile. "Have a nice day, Mr. Prescott." His expression flickered at the formality, but he didn't correct her. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small card, and placed it on the counter beside her. "In case you ever need something, anything." His tone was calm, professional, but the weight in his eyes said otherwise. She glanced down. The card read, "Noah Prescott, CEO, Prescott Urban Developments." The minimalist design gleamed under the warm cafe lights. When she looked back up, he was already at the door, the bell chiming softly, as he stepped out into the drizzle. For a long time, Emma stood there staring at the card, as if it were a piece of a past she wasn't ready to touch. Finally, she slipped it into her apron pocket and let out a slow breath. Zoe returned from the back room a few minutes later, glancing at her curiously. "Everything okay?" she asked. Emma nodded, though her voice betrayed her. Yeah, just someone I used to know. Zoe raised an eyebrow but didn't press. When the last customer left and the cafe settled into its usual evening quiet, Emma pulled the business card from her pocket and studied the embossed letters again. The boy who once drew houses for fun now designed skylines. He had built his empire, and she had built walls around her heart. He became everything he dreamed of, she thought bitterly, while I stayed here serving coffee. Outside, the rain tapered off, leaving the street slick and glistening under the streetlights. Emma closed the register, her reflection faint in the glass as she turned off the lights. Somewhere in the city, Noah Prescott was probably stepping into a black car, driving back to an office high above the clouds. But in this small cafe, the ghost of his smile lingered familiar, yet foreign like a song she used to know by heart, but could no longer hum without trembling. That night, Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the faint hum of rain against her window. Sinking with the pulse she couldn't steady, she had tried to bury the past for 12 years, but Noah's sudden reappearance had unearthed everything she had locked away. Every sound outside the passing cars, the wind brushing the blinds, seemed to whisper his name. When sleep finally came, it wasn't peaceful. It carried her back to Maple Creek, to the small lakeside town where it all began. She was 17 again, barefoot on the dock, the sun setting behind the mountains and turning the water to gold. Noah sat beside her sketchbook, in hand, his pencil gliding across the page. "Someday I'll build us a house here," he said, glancing up with that boyish grin that could melt away every worry. Big windows, a porch, overlooking the lake, maybe a garden where you can plant those lavender flowers you love. She had laughed, tossing a pebble into the water. "You make it sound so easy." "It will be," he'd said with conviction, "because we'll do it together. You design the inside, I'll build the outside." "Deal?" She had extended her pinky, and he'd hooked his around hers. "Deal." The memory shimmered painfully before fading into another, the night of their senior prom. She could still see the gym strung with fairy lights, smell the faint sweetness of roses, feel the warmth of his hand on her back, as they danced slowly to some song neither of them remembered later. "Promise me," she had whispered as the music faded. "Promise you'll never disappear." He had kissed her forehead, his voice quiet but sure. "Never. You're my forever, Em." But forever had lasted only until morning. The next day he was gone. No call, no note, no explanation, just gone. For months she had refused to believe it. She checked her phone, obsessively wrote letters she never sent, sat by the lake waiting for his car to appear. Her mother's gentle voice had been the one to shatter the illusion. "Sweetheart, sometimes people leave, not because they stop caring, but because they don't know how to stay." Emma rolled onto her side, squeezing her eyes shut. She had told herself she was done with all of that, done being the girl who waited. But seeing him again had cracked something she didn't know was still fragile. The following morning she found herself distracted at work. She poured the wrong milk into a customer's order, burned her wrist on the espresso machine, and nearly slipped on a wet patch of floor. "You sure you're okay?" Zoe asked, concerned. "You've been off all day, just tired," Emma muttered, forcing a smile. But exhaustion wasn't the problem. It was the pull, the way her thoughts kept drifting to Noah, to what he was doing, to why he'd walked into her cafe after all this time. Around noon, as she was wiping down a table, her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She pulled it out, expecting a message from her mother or Ben. But her heart skipped when she saw the name. Noah Prescott. The text was short, almost hesitant. I owe you a truth. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. my office. For a moment she just stared at it, her pulse pounding in her ears. She typed deleted, then typed again, before finally setting the phone down. What truth? What could possibly justify 12 years of silence? That night she stood by her window, city lights flickering through the mist, and tried to convince herself not to go. But curiosity had a cruel persistence, especially when it wore the face of your first love. The next morning arrived in a blur. Emma woke before dawn, her nerves already raw. She made coffee, burned her toast, and changed outfits twice, before settling on something simple, a cream blouse, black slacks hair tied neatly back. She told herself it wasn't a date, just closure. Still, her hands trembled as she applied a touch of mascara. At the cafe, she couldn't focus. Even Mr. Whitaker noticed her distraction. You look like a woman about to face a ghost, he said kindly. Maybe I am, she replied, forcing a laugh. When her shift ended at 1:30, she caught her reflection in the cafe window, composed on the outside, unraveling underneath. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy with gray. As she made her way downtown, she rehearsed a dozen versions of the conversation in her head. She'd demand answers, she'd stay detached, she'd make it clear he no longer had the power to break her. But when she reached the glass tower with Prescott Urban Developments, etched in silver on the door, all that bravado dissolved. The lobby was vast and echoing all marble and steel and minimalist elegance. It smelled faintly of cedar and money. The receptionist greeted her with a professional smile. Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment, Emma Clark? She said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. With Mr. Prescott. Of course, the woman replied. He's expecting you, expecting her. The phrase made something flutter uneasily in Emma's chest. She followed the receptionist to the elevator, her reflection ghosting across the mirrored walls as she ascended floor after floor. 47 stories up, the doors opened to reveal a panoramic view of Seattle, the Space Needle. Rising through mist, the bay glimmering faintly beyond. A woman in a navy suit led her down a quiet corridor to a pair of glass doors. He'll be with you shortly, she said before leaving. Alone, Emma stood in the middle of Noah Prescott's office, surrounded by sleek furniture and framed architectural sketches. The room was tastefully minimalist steel walnut and soft grays, but it was the wall behind his desk that caught her breath. It was covered in framed drawings, some rough, some refined. She stepped closer and froze. The sketches were familiar. Curved lines, detailed structures, delicate shading. She knew the handwriting in the corner, NP plus EC, her initials beside his. Her eyes stung. These were their old designs, the ones they had made together in high school plans for their dream studio, their lakeside house. He had kept them. She was still staring when the door opened behind her. You inspired that one, said a voice she could never forget. Emma turned. Noah stood in the doorway, no longer the stranger from the cafe, but the boy she once knew, aged by years, but softened by something real in his expression. For a heartbeat, the years between them vanished. Her voice came out barely a whisper. You kept our drawings. I kept everything he said, quietly stepping inside. I never stopped believing in them, or you. The words landed like a stone, dropped into still water, rippling through the fragile calm she had built around her life. For the first time in years, she didn't know whether to run or to stay. He motioned toward the seating area. "Please sit. There's something I need to explain." And though her mind screamed for distance, her heart betrayed her feet. She sat. The ghosts of what could have been were no longer content to haunt her dreams. They had come to life, sitting right across from her. Noah sat across from her, the skyline of Seattle sprawling behind him, like a living mural rain streaking down the tall windows as if echoing the tension that filled the room. Emma clasped her hands together to keep them from trembling, her eyes locked on his, but her heart demanding distance. He looked different here in his own world, controlled, composed, and completely at ease in a space built by power. Yet there was something in the quiet way he regarded her that felt almost fragile. "You said you owe me the truth." She began, her tone steady but cold. "I think 12 years is long enough to explain." Noah exhaled slowly, nodding. "You're right. You deserve that." He stood restless, walking toward the massive window before speaking again. "The day after prom, my father found out about us." Emma blinked. "Found out about us, Charles Prescott." He said the name heavy with history. "He knew everything, where you lived, what your father did, even your college plans." He wasn't just angry, Emma. He was furious. "Not because I loved someone, but because of who you were." "Who I was?" She repeated, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Your father worked for the Prescott Manufacturing Division. To him, that made you part of the help, beneath our name, beneath our world. He told me I was humiliating the family." His jaw tightened. He said if I didn't end it, he'd destroy everything your family had. Your father's job, your scholarship, your mother's pension. Everything. Emma's breath caught the edges of her world tilting. "So you just left?" "No," he said quickly, turning to face her. "At first I refused. I told him I didn't care about the money or the company, that I'd build something on my own. But that night he showed me proof letters he'd drafted to your father's employer's threats to revoke funding from your school connections. He could use to blacklist you from every design program in the state. He could do it, Emma, and I knew he would." "So you thought disappearing was the answer?" she asked, bitterness creeping into her tone. "That breaking my heart would protect me?" His expression was pained. "He gave me an ultimatum: leave town the next morning for London and cut all contact or watch your family lose everything. I was 18. I thought if I went, he'd leave you alone." Emma stared at him, her mind spinning. "You didn't even try to tell me." "He had my phone, my email, everything monitored. I tried to write you, but every letter I sent was intercepted. I tried calling from London, but your number was changed. I thought you'd moved on." "Moved on?" She let out a quiet, incredulous laugh. "You vanished, Noah. No call, no note, not even a goodbye. You were my entire world, and then you were just gone." His voice dropped, and I hated myself for it every single day. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the soft patter of rain. Emma looked away, staring at the framed sketches on the wall. The boy she had loved had been silenced by his father's cruelty, but the man sitting before her had built an empire. He could have found her. He could have tried harder. "When my father died, I found the letters," Noah continued quietly. "He'd kept them all, dozens of them, every word I ever wrote to you." He paused, emotion roughening his voice. "I reread them, every single one. And that's when I decided I had to find you, no matter how much time had passed." "You came back after 12 years, she said, her tone flat. What did you expect to find? The same girl by the lake waiting for you? No, he said. I came back hoping to find the woman she became. The one who kept going when life got hard. The one I never stopped loving. The sincerity in his voice hit her like a bruise. She wanted to believe him, but believing meant reopening every wound he'd left behind. You could have explained this years ago, she whispered. I know, he said softly. But when I finally came home, I heard about your father's passing. Then someone told me you'd left Maple Creek. I looked for you, but by the time I found out you were in Seattle, I was too much of a coward to face you. Emma blinked back tears. Coward doesn't begin to cover it. You're right, he said again, his honesty disarming in its simplicity. I thought success would make me brave, that building something great would make me worthy of you. But it only made me realize what I'd lost. And now what? She asked quietly. You're here to rewrite history. To pick up where we left off. No, he said. I can't erase what happened, but I can finally give you what my father stole from you. He walked to his desk, pulling out a sleek black folder. Before he died, I uncovered something else. Something you need to see. Emma hesitated before taking the folder from him. Inside were documents, corporate records, old investment files, signed agreements. One name appeared over and over, Lila Clark, her mother. Emma frowned, flipping through the pages. What is this? A list of silent shareholders in Prescott Manufacturing. Your mother's name was one of them. My grandfather made her a beneficiary years ago as repayment for what his company did to Maple Creek. That doesn't make sense, Emma said, her voice shaking. My mother worked in textiles, not finance. I didn't believe it either, Noah said, but the records are real. My grandfather invested in that factory through shell companies using your mother's name to protect her from my father's influence. It was his way of making amends for taking land from your family decades earlier. Emma felt dizzy. You're saying my family owned part of Prescott Manufacturing? A small part, he said gently, but yes, it was meant to secure your family's future. My father hid it to keep control. She stared down at the papers, her thoughts spiraling. The man who had ripped their lives apart had been sitting on a secret that might have saved them. Why are you showing me this now? She asked. Because it belongs to you, Noah replied. And because the truth about what happened between our families is the only way forward. The past doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. Emma's throat ached with conflicting emotions, anger, grief, disbelief. Do you expect me to thank you for this, for showing up after 12 years and handing me a folder full of ghosts? No, he said softly. I expect you to hate me, but I also want you to know I never stopped caring. The vulnerability in his voice undid her composure. She stood pacing toward the window. The city below looked small, blurred by rain, insignificant compared to the storm inside her. You don't get to just walk back into my life, Noah. You don't get to explain everything away with money and apologies. I know, he said, standing too, but I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for the chance to make things right. And what does that even mean? She demanded, spinning to face him. You think this is something you can fix? No, he admitted quietly. But maybe I can rebuild something from what's left. The words hung between them, heavy with history and hope. For the first time since walking into his office, Emma saw not the billionaire, not the polished CEO, but the boy who once promised her a home by the lake. You really believe you can just rebuild what you destroyed, she whispered. Not rebuild, he said. Finish what we started. The sincerity in his eyes was unbearable. She turned away, pressing a hand to her chest, as if to keep her heart from breaking again. I don't even know who you are anymore, she murmured. Then let me show you, he said softly. Not with words, with actions. Emma looked back at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. You don't even know where to start. I do, he said. Right here. He reached into his jacket and handed her a small envelope. Inside was a card with an address and a time. Tomorrow, he said quietly. 2 p.m. There's more you need to see. She stared at it, then at him. You think I'll show up? I hope you will, he said simply. Because the truth doesn't end here. She slipped the envelope into her bag, her voice low and unsteady. Then we'll see what's left of your truth, Noah. As she left his office, the rain outside had turned heavier, drumming against the glass like a heartbeat she couldn't silence. She didn't know whether she was walking away from closure or towards something far more dangerous, the kind of truth that didn't set you free but changed you forever. The next morning broke gray and restless, the kind of Seattle morning that seemed incapable of light. Emma stood at her kitchen counter, staring at the small white envelope Noah had given her. The address printed inside led to an estate on the north edge of the city, Prescott Holdings Archive Facility. The name alone made her stomach tighten. She had spent half the night trying to convince herself not to go, but curiosity and anger had fused into something unrelenting. By 1:30, she was standing outside a sleek building of glass and steel, surrounded by old cedar trees, the kind of place that looked both timeless and untouchable. Inside, a receptionist led her through a corridor lined with photographs, portraits of the Prescott family across generations. Men in suits, women in pearls, power frozen in frames. At the end of the hall, Noah waited. He wasn't in a suit this time, just a navy sweater and slacks. Looking strangely human against the backdrop of his empire. You came, he said quietly. Emma kept her arms crossed. You didn't give me much choice. You always had a choice, he replied. But I'm glad you're here. There's something I need to show you, and I'd rather you hear it from me than anyone else. He led her into a private archive room where boxes and leather-bound ledgers filled the shelves. The faint scent of dust and paper mixed with cold air. On the table lay a single folder labeled Prescott Manufacturing, 1986 to 1998. Noah opened it carefully and slid several documents toward her. These are financial records from my grandfather's tenure, he explained. He built most of his fortune in the late 80s, but what people don't know is that he nearly lost everything in the 90s. To save the company, he started investing quietly in small-town industries. Factories, workshops, places like Maple Creek Textiles. Emma frowned, scanning the papers. That's where my mother worked, exactly, Noah said. But it's more complicated than that. The land that factory was built on once belonged to your grandfather. My grandfather bought it during a financial crisis, supposedly. To save your family from foreclosure, he promised to return the property after stabilizing the business, but he never did. He died before making good on it. My father inherited both the factory and the grudge, so our families were tied by debt, she murmured, her chest tightening. By more than that, Noah said. My grandfather felt guilty. After your father joined the factory years later, he set up a silent investment in your mother's name. Enough shares to give her legal claim as a minority owner. But my father Charles buried that ownership under shell companies. He didn't want the Prescott legacy connected to what he called a family of mill workers. Emma looked up sharply. My mother never mentioned any of this. She didn't know Noah said, "Your family received annual dividends under a different name, a fund called Silver Grain Holdings. It was meant to support employee welfare after the layoffs in the late 2000s, but my father kept it hidden." He handed her another paper, a notarized statement bearing the name Lila Clark, her mother's signature. The date beside it made Emma's stomach twist. "This is from the year my father died," she whispered. "He was already sick." She must have signed something without understanding. Noah's eyes softened. "I think your father knew more than he told her." I found letters between him and my grandfather, old correspondence about the Maple Creek plant. They worked together briefly. It seems they shared the same dream, turning that factory into a cooperative owned by its workers. But after my grandfather died, Charles took control and shut it down instead. Emma's head spun as she pieced it together. "So your family's fortune was built partly on ours." "Yes," he admitted, "but it wasn't supposed to stay that way. My grandfather tried to make amends, and my father reversed it out of pride." "And now you're trying to fix it," she said bitterly. "To rewrite the story and make yourself the hero." "No," Noah said quietly. "To tell the truth. I've already arranged to transfer your mother's shares to her name officially. It won't erase the past, but it gives back what was stolen." Emma stared at him. Her emotions tangled: grief, confusion, anger, and something dangerously close to gratitude. "You think this will make me forgive you?" "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I just need you to understand that I came back because everything our families, our history, it was all connected. We were never just two kids in love. We were the last bridge between two legacies trying to destroy each other." The words lingered heavy and haunting. Emma turned away, running her hand along the edge of the table. "You knew all this before you found me." "Some of it," he admitted. "The rest I uncovered recently, after my father's death. I didn't plan to involve you until I realized your mother's name was tied to the accounts. You should have told me sooner. You wouldn't have believed me sooner." That truth stung. She closed the folder slowly, her gaze drifting to the portraits lining the wall. Men with sharp eyes and cold smiles, the kind of people who built empires from other people's struggles. "My mother used to say that our lives were small but honest," Emma murmured. "I guess that was only half true." "She wasn't wrong," Noah said softly. "Honesty doesn't always mean knowing the whole truth." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and placed an old photograph on the table. "I found this in my grandfather's study. That's your grandmother. And this," he pointed at a younger man beside her, "is my grandfather." Emma's breath caught. The photo showed two people laughing outside what looked like the old textile factory. "They knew each other," she whispered. "They did. My grandfather wrote in his notes that she convinced him to keep the plant open after a fire in 1965. Said she was the only reason he didn't walk away. He never forgot her kindness. My grandmother died when I was little." Emma said, her voice trembling. "I never knew this. Neither did I," Noah said, "until now." Silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the air vents and the faint ticking of a clock. The truth was too vast, too strange to absorb in one sitting. Emma pressed her palms against the table, grounding herself. "So what do I do with this information?" "Whatever you want," Noah said simply. "You and your mother are the rightful shareholders now. You can sell it, claim it, donate it. It's yours." "You really think this fixes anything?" she asked, her voice breaking. "It's not about fixing," he said. "It's about giving back what was yours before my family took it. And maybe in doing that, I can finally stop living under his shadow." Emma looked at him, and for the first time, she saw not a billionaire or a ghost from her past, but a man trying to rewrite the legacy he was born into. The weight in his eyes wasn't arrogance, it was exhaustion. "You've built your whole life trying to undo your father," she said softly, "and it's still destroying you." "Maybe," he admitted, "but at least now I'm doing it for the right reasons." He handed her a USB drive. "Everything you need is on here. Financial records, legal transfers, proof of ownership. It's clean, transparent." She took it silently, her fingers brushing his. The contact sent a spark through her chest, sharp and unwanted. "I'll show this to my mother," she said finally. "She deserves to know the truth." "She does," Noah agreed. "But Emma, be gentle with her. The truth can heal, but it can also hurt." Emma met his gaze, her heart heavy. "You'd know." She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, Noah spoke again. "Emma, there's one more thing," he said quietly. "You weren't the only one I lost when I left Maple Creek. I lost the person I was supposed to become." She paused her back to him, then said without turning around, "Maybe it's time you stop chasing who you were and start deciding who you want to be." And with that, she walked out into the pale gray light, clutching the folder like a fragile piece of truth. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the clouds lingered just like the past that refused to fade. The rain returned that evening like a restless ghost tapping against Emma's apartment window as she sat at the kitchen table with the folder spread open before her. Her mother's reading glasses rested near the papers, a half-finished cup of tea growing cold beside them. Lila Clark had read in silence for nearly 20 minutes, her expression unreadable. Finally, she exhaled and leaned back in her chair. "I knew your father had dealings with Michael Prescott," she said softly, referring to Noah's grandfather. "But I never imagined it ran this deep." "You didn't know about the investments?" Emma asked. "No," her mother said. "Your father mentioned once that someone in the Prescott family had helped the factory during hard times, but he never told me details. Maybe he wanted to protect me, or maybe he didn't want to believe the help came from the same people who looked down on us." Emma folded her arms, the ache in her chest heavy. "Noah says his father buried the connection, that he's trying to restore what was stolen." "Be careful, sweetheart," Lila warned gently. "A man who spent his life building walls doesn't take them down without reason. Ask yourself who benefits when the truth comes out." Emma frowned, but her mother's words stayed with her long after she went to bed. The next day at the cafe, she tried to focus on work, but the memories of Noah's confession haunted her. Each customer's face blurred into the next, the sound of milk steaming turning into background noise. When she finally looked at the clock, it was nearly closing time. She turned off the espresso machine just as the bell above the door rang. A woman stood there, mid-30s, elegant in a navy trench coat, her posture sharp and self-assured. Her dark hair was pulled into a low bun, and her gray eyes studied the cafe like a detective scanning for clues. "We're about to close," Emma said politely, slipping off her apron. The woman smiled faintly. "I'm not here for coffee. I'm here for you, Ms. Clark." The words sent a chill down Emma's spine. "Do I know you?" "Not yet," the woman replied, stepping closer. "But you should. My name is Clara Monroe. I used to work for Prescott Urban Developments. I was vice president until last year before I resigned." "Okay," Emma said cautiously. "What does that have to do with me?" Clara glanced toward the window, lowering her voice. "Noah Prescott isn't the man you think he is." Emma's pulse quickened, though she tried to keep her tone steady. "I think that's my decision to make," maybe Clara said. "But it's easier to make decisions when you know the facts." She opened her bag and placed a folder on the counter. Inside were newspaper clippings, financial reports, and a photograph of a man Emma didn't recognize. Clara tapped the photo. "This is Thomas Reed, architect. He ran a small firm, Harper & Reed Designs. They were competitors to Prescott Urban 5 years ago. Talented, ethical, idealistic. Prescott bought them out during an economic slump. 2 months later, Reed jumped from his office balcony." Emma stared at her. "You're implying Noah caused that, I'm saying." "The acquisition destroyed Reed," Clara said. "He'd poured his life into that company, and Noah's team bled it dry. Contracts, pulled clients, poached reputations, tarnished. All part of a corporate takeover. The board called it strategic consolidation, but Reed's wife called it murder by ambition." Emma's throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I know what's happening between you and him," Clara said calmly. "And I've seen how he operates. He builds things, yes, but sometimes he destroys people first. Prescott men always have." "You think he's like his father?" Emma asked bitterly. "I think he's worse," Clara replied. "Charles Prescott was ruthless but predictable. Noah hides his ruthlessness behind empathy. He's learned how to look like a savior while playing the same game." Emma clenched her fists. "You're wrong. He's trying to make things right." Clara's smile was thin. "Did he tell you about the Reed Foundation?" "The charity he started after Reed's death," yes, Emma said hesitantly. "He said it was to honor Reed's legacy." "It was damage control," Clara said flatly. "A rebranding move. He started it the same week Reed's widow filed a wrongful death suit, one she later withdrew after an undisclosed settlement. Ask yourself who benefits from redemption. That perfectly timed." Emma felt heat rising in her face. "Why should I believe you? Because I worked there. I saw the documents, the meetings, the manipulation." Clara's voice softened. "I don't know what he told you, but you deserve to know everything before you decide if you can trust him again." "And what do you want out of this?" Emma asked. "Revenge, closure?" Neither, Clara said, just a little truth. Something in short supply when it comes to the Prescotts. She gathered her things and handed Emma a business card. "If you ever want to see the proof, call me. I kept copies of everything. Board memos, emails, internal audits. It's all there." Emma stared at the card, feeling dizzy. "Why me?" "Because he still loves you," Clara said simply. "And that makes you the only person who can hold him accountable." Then she left her heels clicking against the tile until the bell over the door chimed her departure. The cafe felt suddenly colder, emptier. Emma stood there for several minutes, the folder untouched before her, her heart pounding with doubt she didn't want to admit. She closed up early that night and walked home through the drizzle, Clara's words echoing in her mind. Could Noah really be capable of what she described? She remembered his voice soft and remorseful, telling her he wanted to make things right. But behind that remorse, had there been something darker? At home, she poured herself a glass of water She didn't drink. The city lights flickered across her window, and for the first time since Noah's return, she felt afraid of what she might discover. Her phone buzzed suddenly, the sound slicing through the silence. A message from Noah appeared on the screen. "I know what you learned today. Clara came to see you. Please don't believe everything she says. Can we talk?" Emma froze. "How did he know?" Slowly, she typed back. How could you possibly know that his reply came almost instantly? "Because I know her, and I know what she's capable of." Emma's hands trembled as she set down the phone. She didn't respond. Instead, she picked up the folder Clara had left and flipped through the pages. There were reports, emails, financial records, all implicating Prescott Urban in aggressive acquisitions. It looked legitimate, too legitimate. And the photo of Thomas Reed stared back at her like a silent accusation. Sleep never came that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw two versions of Noah, the boy she'd loved, and the man he'd become, overlapping and irreconcilable. By morning, she felt hollow. Her mother noticed the dark circles under her eyes at breakfast. "Rough night just thinking," Emma said quietly. About Noah, Lila studied her for a moment, then sighed. "Love makes fools of us all. But remember, sweetheart, truth doesn't hide behind charm. He's not lying." Emma insisted, though the conviction in her voice cracked halfway through. "He can't be." "Then let him prove it," Lila said simply. "If he's different, he'll show you." That afternoon, as Emma walked to the bus stop, a black sedan pulled up beside the curb. The tinted window rolled down, revealing Noah behind the wheel. His expression was taut worry etched across his features. "Get in," he said. "We need to talk." "About what Clara," he said, "and the lies she's spreading." She hesitated, then opened the door and slid inside. The interior smelled faintly of cedar and rain. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Noah said quietly, "Whatever she told you, it's not the full story." "Then tell me the full story," Emma said, "because right now I don't know what to believe." Noah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Thomas Reed wasn't a saint. He was stealing proprietary designs, selling them to competitors. I confronted him privately. The next day, he killed himself. I blamed myself for not seeing how broken he was, but I didn't destroy him. I tried to help his wife. I paid for her legal fees, her son's college tuition. The foundation wasn't a cover-up, Emma. It was guilt, pure guilt. She turned to him, searching his face. And Clara. She wanted more than a job, Noah said bitterly. She wanted control. When I refused to promote her after she leaked confidential data, she quit. She's been trying to ruin me ever since. The rawness in his tone was undeniable, but Emma couldn't tell if it was truth or performance. "You're asking me to take your word over hers," she said quietly. "I'm asking you to trust what you know about me," he said, "not what others tell you." Rain began to fall harder, streaking across the windshield like 1,000 small fractures. Emma looked out at the gray world beyond her reflection, merging with his in the glass. "I don't know who you are anymore, Noah," she whispered. "Then let me remind you," he said. And for the first time, she didn't pull away when his hand reached for hers. The silence in the car stretched long and taut, filled with the rhythm of rain against the windshield and the muted sound of the city outside. Emma could feel the weight of Noah's gaze on her, steady and searching, as if he were trying to read every thought she refused to voice. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but edged with exhaustion. "You want me to trust you, but all I've had since you came back are half-truths and ghosts. You say you want to make things right, but all I see are layers of damage, your father's, your company's, yours. Noah turned off the engine, leaving only the sound of rain. You're right, he said quietly. I've spent half my life trying to prove I wasn't my father, and the other half becoming him anyway. Every deal, every decision, I told myself it was about redemption. But really it was about control. I thought if I built enough, earned enough, fixed enough, it would erase what he did. What I did. His voice broke slightly, the mask slipping. But it doesn't work that way. You can't build over guilt. It just sinks deeper. Emma looked at him, unsure if the ache in her chest was anger or pity. Then why keep doing it? He gave a humorless laugh. Because it's all I knew. My father raised me on power and fear. The night he sent me away, he told me love makes a man weak. I spent years trying to prove him wrong, but every time I tried to love something, my work, my friends, you, I destroyed it. I didn't know how to hold anything gently. The honesty in his tone startled her. It wasn't the defensive charm she'd seen before, but raw confession. Clara said you used people, she said carefully, that you hurt them to stay on top. She's not wrong, he admitted. I used to think it was survival, but it was arrogance. I built a company on ambition, not compassion, and it cost me more than money ever gave me back. Reed's death, that broke something in me. I didn't push him, Emma, but I didn't save him either. And when he fell, I realized I'd become the kind of man my father always wanted me to be. He paused, staring out the rain-soaked window. I hated that realization. I hated myself. Emma swallowed hard. So that's what this is? You coming back, giving my family their shares? Digging up old secrets, your way of cleansing the guilt. No, he said, turning toward her. This isn't about redemption through charity. This is about you. You're the only part of my life that was ever pure. I came back because I couldn't keep pretending that success meant peace. I came back because I never stopped seeing your face the night I left. His voice cracked. I broke you to protect you, and in doing that, I broke myself. Emma looked down her reflection, trembling in the car's glass. The part of her that had waited for this, an apology, an explanation, felt hollow now that it had come. You think words can fix 12 years of silence? She asked quietly. No, he said. But I think the truth can start too. She turned to him, then her eyes burning with unshed tears. You don't get to decide when the truth starts, Noah. You forfeited that when you left. I know, he said softly. But if I could go back, you can't, she interrupted. And maybe that's the point. Some things stay broken. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt heavy, dense, with things they'd never said. Then Noah reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. What's that? She asked. A letter, he said. The last one I wrote you before I left. My father never sent it. I found it last year in his safe. He handed it to her, and his hand trembled slightly. Read it when you're ready. It's everything I couldn't say. She took it slowly, her heart thudding against her ribs. Why show me this now? Because I don't want to lie anymore, he said. I don't want the last thing between us to be silence. Emma looked at him, really looked, and saw the man beneath the armor, tired, flawed, haunted. A man trying to undo the past without knowing how. What do you want from me, Noah? She whispered. Forgiveness. No, he said, after a long pause. Choice, the one you never got to make when I left. The rain eased into a drizzle, the kind that carried the smell of earth and asphalt. outside the city seemed to slow, as if giving them permission to breathe. "You could hate me," he continued softly. "Walk away, and I'll never bother you again. Or you could give me the chance to prove I'm not the man I was. Not for my sake, but for yours. Because you deserve to see the truth of who I've become." Emma stared out the window, her chest tightening. "You don't understand," she said. "I spent years building a life without you. It's not much, but it's mine. If I let you in again, and you break it, there won't be anything left of me to rebuild." "Then I'll hold it for you until you can," he said simply. The earnestness in his voice made her throat ache. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But belief required trust, and trust was something that had drowned with her youth. "You can't just promise things like that," she said finally. "Not anymore." "I'm not promising," he said. "I'm offering." She closed her eyes, fighting the war inside her, the part that still loved him, the part that hated herself for it, and the part that longed to believe in the possibility of change. "If I let you in," she said quietly, "it won't be because of who you were. It'll be because of who you prove yourself to be." "Then that's all I ask," he said. "A chance to prove it." The sound of his voice was steady, but his eyes were wet. He reached into his jacket again and handed her another document, a deed embossed and official. "What's this?" she asked, scanning it. "The Clark Studio project," he said. "I bought the old Maple Creek factory. I'm rebuilding it into a community design center. Half of it will belong to your mother's name. The other half will be under yours." Emma looked up sharply. "You're rebuilding the factory." "We always said we'd build something together," he said softly. "Now we can." The words undid her. She felt tears spill before she could stop them. "You can't just give me dreams and call it redemption," she whispered. "I'm not giving you dreams," he said. "I'm giving you the foundation to build your own." For the first time, she had no answer. She sat there in silence, clutching the letter, the deed, the weight of 12 years pressing on her shoulders. Outside, the rain stopped completely, and a faint light broke through the clouds. She looked at him, this man, who had once been her world, and then her ruin, and saw not a savior or a villain, but something far more human. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said finally. "Then don't," he said. "Just don't walk away." She hesitated, then whispered, "I don't know if I can stay either." "Then stay until you know," he said gently. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was fragile, uncertain, but alive. Emma folded the letter and tucked it into her coat. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. And when she stepped out of the car, the first sunlight in days touched her face pale and hesitant. Like hope learning to breathe again. Months passed, and the rhythm of life in Seattle softened into something quieter, steadier. The rain still came often, but Emma no longer flinched when thunder rolled, or when the scent of coffee reminded her of the café where it all began. Change had not come suddenly. It had arrived in quiet moments, in choices made without promises, in small acts that built trust instead of demanding it. Noah kept his word. He didn't call every day, didn't press, didn't try to reclaim her with grand gestures. Instead, he worked. The old Maple Creek factory became a construction site reborn with purpose. Where rust and silence had reigned for years, scaffolding rose, and workers filled the air with the sound of hammers and progress. He named the project the Clark Studio Initiative, though he never announced why publicly. To everyone else, it was just another redevelopment, but to Emma, it was the first tangible proof that he was rebuilding more than property. He was rebuilding faith. The first time she returned to Maple Creek, the sight stopped her in her tracks. The brick walls had been cleaned and strengthened, the broken windows replaced with glass that reflected the sky. The sign out front read Clark's Studio, coming soon, and her mother's name sat engraved on a bronze plate beside it. Emma stood in silence as workers moved around her, feeling her throat tighten. "It's strange, isn't it?" said a voice behind her. She turned. Noah stood a few feet away. Hard hat in hand, his hair tousled, his sleeves rolled up. He looked nothing like the billionaire who had walked into her cafe months ago. He looked like the boy who once promised to build her a home, older now, weathered, but finally real. "I didn't expect you here today," she said. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." "You gave me this," she said softly, gesturing toward the sight. "I had to see it for myself." "It's yours," he said, "and your mother's. I'm just finishing what I should have started years ago." She looked at him for a long moment. "You really did it," she murmured. "You really rebuilt it." "You said once that dreams don't pay bills," he said with a faint smile. "So I figured I'd build a dream that does." She almost laughed, but her heart ached too much for humor. "You always knew what to say." "Not always," he said quietly. "Not when it mattered most." They walked together through the half-finished interior, where sunlight streamed through wide new windows. The space smelled of sawdust and paint, and Emma could almost imagine what it would look like when it was finished. Tables lined with design sketches, students learning architecture, local artists sharing space, where once their parents had labored. "There'll be an art wing," Noah said, showing her a layout plan. "And a cafe on the corner. I was thinking we could name it Evergreen." Her eyes lifted to his, catching the small smile tugging at his mouth. "You remembered." "I remember everything he said simply." She took a slow breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why do all this, Noah? Why go this far?" He hesitated, looking out the window toward the lake beyond the trees. "Because I can't undo the past, but I can build something that gives it meaning." His gaze found hers again, steady and full. "Because I want to be the kind of man your father would have wanted for you. The kind of man who stays." The words settled between them, like the light filtering through the dust. For the first time, she didn't look away. "Maybe people really can change," she said softly. "If they're willing to break everything first," maybe he said. "Or maybe we just learn how to build differently." As they stood in the quiet, Emma felt something inside her shift. A weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying begin to ease. This wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something close. It was understanding. In the weeks that followed, she became part of the project without meaning to. At first, she visited occasionally, offering small suggestions about interior layouts, lighting, or color palettes. Then she started staying longer, sketching plans late into the afternoon, sipping coffee while Noah and his team reviewed blueprints nearby. It wasn't like before. There were no promises, no illusions of perfect endings. Just two people rebuilding slowly, deliberately, letting the past fade in the rhythm of shared purpose. Her mother visited once the structure was nearly complete. Lila walked through the halls in quiet awe, her eyes glistening. "Your father would have loved this," she said softly. "He always believed beauty could come from hard work." Emma smiled faintly. He was right. Lila took her hand. "And so were you, sweetheart. Some things do come back, just not in the way we expect." When the grand opening finally arrived, it wasn't lavish or loud. A modest crowd gathered under soft autumn sunlight. The mayor spoke briefly, photographers clicked their cameras, and workers stood at the edges smiling proudly. Emma stood beside her mother near the entrance, her heart steady but full. Noah stepped forward to give his speech. He wore no tie, no pretense, just a man standing before the result of his choices. This place, he began, was born from two families' mistakes and rebuilt with their hope. It's proof that redemption isn't about erasing history. It's about facing it and choosing to do better. His voice wavered slightly. Today isn't about me. It's about everyone who believed that broken things can still have worth. When the ribbon was cut and the applause rose, Emma felt tears spill down her cheeks. Not because the past had vanished, but because for the first time it no longer hurt to remember. As the crowd began to drift inside, Noah found her near the steps. "You were right," he said softly. "About what? About forgiveness. It isn't given, it's earned piece by piece. And you're still earning it," she said, her lips curving faintly. "Good," he said. "That means I still get to try." They stood together as the afternoon light poured across the glass facade, painting everything in gold. The lake shimmered in the distance, the same one where a boy once made her a promise. Only now it wasn't a dream of forever. It was something stronger, quieter, more real, the promise of beginning again. 6 months later, the first snow of winter drifted down over Seattle like a memory retold in whispers soft and fleeting. The city lights shimmered beneath a pale fog, and inside the newly opened Clark studio warmth glowed from every window. The building no longer smelled of paint and dust, but of brewed coffee-polished wood and life returning. Emma stood in the main gallery beneath a vaulted ceiling, lined with exposed beams and string lights that cast a golden glow across the room. Around her, people moved easily between the art displays and the cozy café corner, chatting over lattes and sketches. It felt like a dream she had drawn years ago in the back of her sketchbook, a place where creativity and community could breathe together. Only this wasn't a dream, it was hers. Outside the wide glass windows, snowflakes fell against the night sky, catching the glow from the street lamps like scattered stars. She could see her reflection in the glass, older, calmer, her eyes carrying both the storms and the light that followed. "You did it," came her mother's voice from behind her. Emma turned to see Lila standing near the entrance, wrapped in a gray shawl, her face soft with pride. "No," Emma said with a smile. "We did it." Her mother's eyes shimmered. "Your father would be so proud. He always said one day you'd build something that lasted." Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. "I just wish he could see it." "Oh, sweetheart," Lila said gently, resting a hand on her shoulder. "He does." They stood there for a moment, watching the guests mingle the music hum. Softly through the speakers, the walls filled with warmth and laughter instead of silence. Emma felt her heart steady in a way it hadn't for years. This wasn't about loss anymore. It was about everything that had survived it. The sound of footsteps behind them made her turn. Noah was walking toward her, his dark coat dusted with snow, a bouquet of lavender in his hands. The sight made her heart twist with something familiar and tender. "I thought you might like these," he said, his voice carrying that soft mix of shyness and warmth that still disarmed her. "You remembered," she said quietly. "You said once you wanted lavender around the house we'd build one day," he replied. I figured it was time to keep that promise. He looked around, his gaze sweeping the studio with quiet awe. You did it, Emma. You turned what was broken into something beautiful. She shook her head slightly. We did it. You gave me the foundation. I just built from it. No, he said softly. You built all of this because you never stopped believing in what could be, even when I didn't deserve to be part of it. For a moment they stood in silence, the crowd fading into background noise. Emma's eyes flickered to the wall near the entrance where a framed painting hung, an abstract piece in shades of lavender and blue. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "The Home We Dreamed Of," dedicated to Michael and Lila Clark. Do you ever think, she said softly, that maybe everything had to fall apart so it could come together like this? Noah followed her gaze to the painting, his expression thoughtful. I used to think loss was punishment, he said. Now I think it's the price we pay to understand what really matters. He glanced back at her, his voice quieter. For me, that's you. Her breath caught, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was from the stillness that came when the heart finally stopped fighting itself. You've changed, she said. So have you, he replied, but somehow we're still us. Outside snow thickened and the laughter of children echoed from the courtyard where small lanterns lined the path. Emma walked with him toward the large glass doors where the city lights blurred into white. Do you miss the skyline, she asked, the offices, the meetings, the endless noise? Not really, he said with a small smile. For the first time, I wake up and don't feel like I'm chasing something. This project, this place, gave me a reason to stop running. You're not running, she said gently. You're home. The word lingered between them, soft and sure. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key, pressing it into her palm. What's this? She asked. Come and see, he said. He led her through the side exit and across the courtyard to a small annex building behind the studio. It was simple, elegant, with wide windows and soft lights glowing inside. He pushed open the door, revealing a cozy interior, wood floors, a stone fireplace, shelves lined with books and architectural sketches, and by the window, a small table with 2 cups and a vase of lavender. It's not much, Noah said quietly, but it's yours, ours if you'll let it be, the home we dreamed of. For a moment she couldn't speak. Every wall inside her heart that had been built to keep him out began to crumble, not in the way that hurt, but in the way that finally healed. You kept your promise, she whispered. It just took a little longer than we thought. He smiled, eyes bright under the warm light. Some promises take time. Some need us to grow into them. She stepped closer, her voice barely above a breath. And some people need to lose everything before they can be found again. He reached for her hand, tentative but sure, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. The snow outside thickened, wrapping the city in quiet, and the reflection of their joined hands shimmered in the glass like a memory rewritten. For the first time in 12 years, Emma didn't feel the pull of what had been or the fear of what might come. She just felt peace, the kind that settles deep, steady, and lasting. Do you think we'll be okay? She asked softly. I don't know, he admitted. But I think we'll be honest, and that's better. She smiled, leaning into him, her head resting against his shoulder as they watched the snow fall outside the window. The fireplace crackled softly, and for the first time in a long while, the silence between them wasn't painful. It was home. The next morning, the sun rose pale and gold over the city. The studio glowed in the light, the lavender in the window catching the breeze. Emma walked barefoot across the floor, coffee in hand, pausing by the window where the city stretched beyond the horizon. Behind her, Noah stirred awake, his voice rough with sleep. "You're up early," he murmured. "Couldn't sleep," she said, smiling faintly. "Too busy believing this is real." He stood beside her, looking out at the view. The city, the lake, the home they had built, not of glass or marble, but of choices, of second chances, of truths faced instead of avoided. "It's real," he said, "and this time it's ours." She leaned into him, her voice quiet but full. "Some promises take years to keep," she whispered. "Some loves just need the right time to find their way home." Outside, the snow continued to fall soft and endless, erasing footprints and mistakes, leaving behind only the world they had rebuilt together. Before you go, take a deep breath and let this story settle in your heart the way second chances often do, softly but completely. If this story of Emma and Noah touched something in you, maybe it's because we've all known what it's like to lose someone before we were ready, to wish for one more conversation, one more moment, to say what was left unsaid. Their story reminds us that time doesn't always heal everything, but it gives us the space to rebuild differently, to choose love with our eyes open instead of closed. So now it's your turn. What would you have done if you were Emma? Could you have forgiven the man who broke you once, if he returned with the truth in his hands? Or would you have walked away to protect the peace you fought so hard to find? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know your heart's answer. Tell me where you're watching from, because stories like this don't just belong to one place. They belong to anyone who's ever believed that love can survive distance, silence, and time. If this story made you cry, if it made you remember someone you used to love, then don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need to feel hope again tonight. Maybe someone out there is still waiting for their own letter that was never sent, their own chance to rebuild what was lost. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss the next story. Because here, every tale is a journey toward healing, toward home, toward the kind of love that doesn't fade when life gets hard. Rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell us your favorite moment. Was it the cafe, the confession, or the quiet promise under the snow? Every comment, every reaction, every shared tear helps keep this channel alive and helps us keep bringing you stories that remind us all why love, no matter how imperfect, is still worth believing in. So if you are reading this now, thank you for being here, for feeling deeply, for letting a little fiction remind you of something real. And wherever you are in the world tonight, may you find your way back to the person, the place, or the dream that feels like home.